I want to take us straight to Tim Gavan. Tim Gavan is part of the McGregor-Coxall Masterplan team. So let's touch base. Let's see if he's still there. I did tell him to go and get a cup of coffee while we're waiting. Let's hope he didn't go down a cafe and he's now stuck 15 deep in the queue.
Could well
Tim,
be.
are you still there?
Still there, Simon.
Ah, perfect. Excellent. Mr. Gavan, so can you just very quickly just explain to the listeners your role within McGregor-Coxall and the Byron Masterplan?
Okay, so we're land economists. So our job in this process is to understand the economics of the town, what's working, what's not working. And we've done a lot of listening to the community, to the local community. So we've been to all of the workshops and our ears have been open, and so we can understand the issues. And having understood the issues, then we try to solve the issues that we can solve from a land economy point of view. Excuse me, frog in the throat. And then come up with ways to help to pay for the master plan. So we work with the stakeholders, we work with the community, the landowners, which large and small, to help develop the master plan.
Look, and that's it's interesting you mentioned the concept of having to pay for these great ideas, because it is crucial, isn't it? There's no point having a plan that sits on the top shelf with a $100 million price tag that no one's ever going to achieve. It needs to be achievable. It needs to be create some sort of financial and economic stream for us to navigate ourselves down. Before we get to Byron and what you've learned a bit about Byron and some of the thoughts that you've been putting towards how Byron might stimulate its economy through the master plan process, just stepping back, I guess, more broadly, what's your experience and knowledge of other projects and through an economic eye, some of the successes that you've seen other towns or other regions do through a master plan process to stimulate an economic sustainability and I guess particularly to reflect the local needs?
Yes, look, it's an important factor. I suppose that we need to say up front that you just don't look at another master plan for an area and say, well, we're going to use that master plan to try and solve this problem here. Every area is different, and there's no more diverse community than Byron. So whilst we look at other areas, we might say, well, we can identify that issue from that area, that issue from that area, but we just don't go and grab one and say, well, there's the master plan, let's get it done. So examples of that are the Manly Town Centre. There's a lot of similarities there where we reinvigorated the local community there. The local people had some issues that they were being very similar to Byron, and that they were threatened by some of the big international brands, and their own small business were being pushed out because of an affordability issue. Manly again had traffic and parking issues, and so from that point of view, there were some similarities. Newcastle's economy, we worked on that, wasn't as strong as Byron. Byron's economy from that point of view is quite strong, but we helped reinvigorate Newcastle by bringing some local business back into the town centre there. The team right now is working on Springwood. Long time ago, Springwood was a sleepy little place that people bypassed on their way elsewhere, and with some important changes, we've incentivised people like government services and banks and NRMA to come into the little town of Springwood, which now has reinvigorated those local businesses. And so we did that some while ago, and now we're revisiting Springwood. We're giving it a bit of a polish, and just to see what else we can do to reinvigorate. So the master plan very much isn't something you just put into the top drawer and wind it up and away it goes. You need to, like a strategic plan, I suppose, go back and have a look at it, refresh it, and make sure it's still relevant. Turramurra Town Centre was a tired old little town centre, and we're working with all of the stakeholders there. It's a great mix of the local community wanting to reinvigorate a little centre, but we're also working with the private sector as well as local government, who will work together to reinvigorate that little place. And bring the people back. So, yeah, there's good examples that we've been involved with over the years.
And I guess, as you said, sort of one size doesn't fit all, and it must have been, interesting looking at the Byron context because, when you compare it to something like Newcastle and Manly. Newcastle, let's face it, could be a capital city in a sense with its size, and had one massive industry which then sort of, when it wound down, just sort of sucked the life out of the CBD. And certainly my understanding of Newcastle, with I think the project was Renew Newcastle, where they really adopted a lot of pop-up shops, and it was all about reclaiming some of the empty shop fronts to stimulate people to come back, and then potentially give some of those companies, often art studios or sort of creative companies, an opportunity to sort of test their business model, and then some of them have stayed on, and eventually it's just increasingly revitalised that CBD. What are some examples you can think of as far as not just what you guys have done, and obviously some of the benefits in some of the projects you mentioned, are perhaps yet to be seen in a way that some take a while, some initiatives take a while to really bear fruit, as it were. But what are some examples that you might be able to share of best practice, even globally, of what has been shown to work in ways for a town centre to be reinvigorated economically? Can you drill down a little bit more specifically?
Sure.
You talk about polishing up, and these sorts of things. What does it actually look like?
Yeah, good. You've obviously been doing your research, Simon. You know what you're talking about there. But look, if you just take something like Manly, and I'm not suggesting that Byron Bay is Manly, but some of the factors were very, very similar. The local people have told us in Byron that they're losing control of their town. And we've heard that message loud and clear. There's too much traffic, and parking is an issue. So these are the cruxes of the Manly issue as well. And what we did with Manly, and one of the initiatives that we're proposing with Byron as well, is to try and capture areas that enable local business to come back into town and grab back their town. So reactivating the laneways is an important factor there, I think. So enable, because the main streets are the most expensive streets. That's where the big boxes are. It's where the international brands are, and the local businesses can't get in. So if we reactivate the laneways, whilst we're still in the town centre, so we're still in the middle of town, it's still where people want to be, it'll be a lot more affordable, the rents will be lower, and the locals can bring their business back and do what they want to do. So at Manly, for instance, was exactly that. They reactivated the laneways, they made them safe places to walk at night, they changed the lighting, they took some of the cars out, and the locals brought their business back in. And a perfect example of that is McGregor Coxall. McGregor Coxall's office is in one of the laneways at Manly. Mm-hmm. And they're a perfect example of what's happening to reinvigorate the Manly town centre. And we can see some strong similarities between that and Byron. Some of the other areas that we've found, I mentioned Springwood, but there's Brixton Village is one, and the Proxy Project is another one where there were spaces, they were available, and to bring the local businesses back, there were pop-up shops and there were container shops and other areas that were especially created to reinvigorate the local businesses. So these are other areas that we can cherry pick the best of the best and bring them into Byron Bay and make it work.
And it's exciting because it does, I guess, we are one thing about Byron, not overly designing itself with one sort of paint colour or really going overboard initially in a town centre, is that it's perhaps easier to adapt. Tim, I'm just wondering, when you're talking about, Manly, and how, even though, of course, it's, let's face it, it's a suburb in a global city, there are still those similarities. And it sort of struck me that as someone who spent a lot of my years around St Kilda as an adult, The actual CBD or the community and gathering spaces in St Kilda, the footprint's not much different to Byron. I mean, you've got a lot more houses outside the actual shopping area, but really you're talking one or two streets with, similar types amounts of shops. So it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to be a coastal town with, 10 kilometres between little villages to still have a very similar model to work off, because I guess it is still just that concentration of shops, parking and pedestrians, and I guess it strikes me to ask, when you're looking at economic modelling in a sense, do you presume that shoppers or pedestrians or just people in CBDs generally act the same way, or does a tourist town and therefore perhaps someone who's on holiday, do they act differently? Do they spend longer in a town? Do they linger longer, or is it all pretty much the same?
It's all reasonably much the same. We've been doing a lot of work on the key drivers of what's been happening in Byron, and tourism is the key driver. Once upon a time, going back into history, it was whaling and other uses over the years. So we've seen those changes, and now it's tourism. But what we've heard loud and clear, and one of the very first stories that I heard when I first got to Byron in this study was from a local mum who said, look, all I want to do is I want to drop the kids off quickly. I want to go into town. I want to be able to pull up to the bank, go to the post office, do some shopping and get home, and don't want it to take it all day. But that's a strong issue, and parking is one of those issues, and traffic is another. Now, one of the strong things that we've heard and we've noticed from our traffic studies is the day tripper. Now, it's a dominant use in Byron, and it's one of the great sources of revenue that we've got. And I'd like to be able to have a conversation around, well, how do we get that user pays thing going? And it's one of the parts of the study that we'll be doing. But if we can find a way to understand the nature of the day tripper, allow them in, but not right into the town centre, perhaps park just outside the town centre and continue on their way. And we believe that they will do that because the beauty of Byron is the beach, and to a lesser extent it's the shops and what have you. They will still come. So if we can solve that issue and we can put parking out of the town centre or not right in the middle of it, I think we can go some way to solving the issue of the locals, but also continue on with the that good tourism dollar.
I guess I wasn't going to necessarily get into too much specifics until we get the draft master plan that comes out, but it just struck me, we're talking about the parking. Obviously council is grappling with how do we deal with with paid parking, and how do we, as you said, try to get some sort of revenue from the visitors without impinging too greatly on locals, and just trying to get that right, but with an understanding that we need to raise revenue of a significant amount. That question of out-of-town parking, I guess, Butler Street is the one place that we're all talking, and we're all looking, quite logically that could be an all-day or a large parking space and allow us to sort of take some car parking out of the CBD. A problem with that, of course, is that it's owned by Crown Land, so revenue raised there, certainly at this stage, unless things change, have to remain on the Crown Reserve. So I guess is that question, would it be better to have locals parking there all day and then we sort of take our money from a coupon, so to speak, and get the visitors to use the CBD and make money from the paid parking? Or do you have visitors out there and potentially not raise the same revenue, or at least have the freedom to spend the revenue how the town needs? It's a hard reality, isn't it, when you're trying to deal with spaces that the council and therefore the community don't actually own?
Look, Crown Land is a major stakeholder in Byron Bay, and we all need to have a good relationship with our stakeholders, whether they're private or public, and Crown Land is one of the major ones. So as part of the study and work we're doing is we're working with Crown Land and other stakeholders to see how we can work with them to maximise the income that's coming in, and to work out how we can do short and medium and long-term benefits to Byron Bay. In terms of parking, look, Simon, it's in the mix. We're investigating it, but we're no closer to making any recommendations. We're doing a lot of listening at the moment, and by the end of this process, we will have worked out some options for the community to say, well, yep, we understand that we need to pay for this. These are the options that we're willing to accept. And really, when it gets down to it, it's for the community. But we will give those options, and it really is up to the people to say, well, we want to solve this problem so much, then we're willing to go this far, this far, or this far. Yeah, where the parking sits at the moment is, as you're right, it is just a little bit premature. But there are good options there.
And it's important, I guess, for the wider community to, understand that there is a lot of thinking, a lot of specialised, research and considerations going on. And when some options come forward, they certainly won't have been plucked from the sky. Look, we're running out of time, Tim. But I'm just, you touched on Byron's capacity to, potentially get some cars out of town to allow the CBD to be a bit more pedestrian friendly, which therefore, of course, allows residents and visitors to potentially stay a little bit longer or enjoy their experience in there, and therefore arguably potentially spend more and shop, etc., and to stimulate businesses. Can you think of any sort of low-hanging fruit, as it were, that you've already sort of looked at that you think could be a goer as far as activation within Byron itself to stimulate local economy?
Yeah. Look, one of the things we need to look at, Simon, is the planning. One of the barriers to us reinvigorating the laneways is the fact that the planning right now doesn't allow us to do that. And even for us to put a small business at the back of one of those laneways, we need to make some tweaks to the planning process. And the other interesting thing that's happening in Byron Bay at the moment is that whilst you can get an approval to build a building for short-term accommodation, there's no way that you can build one right now for long-term accommodation. So bringing more people in to live will actually have two positive things. One, it will take less cars off the street coming into town. I mean, I drove in there the other day at 7 o'clock in the morning in the middle of winter. They're not day trippers. They're people coming to work. So if we can do something with the planning to enable more dwellings in the town to be used for long-term accommodation, I think that will be a good thing. Those people then, instead of driving back to wherever they are for an hour or half an hour, they can stay in town, they can stick around, spend some more money, and that will have an added benefit. Some of the other things we can do is to in some of the car parks in the short term, maybe we could use some of these short-term pop-up type of stalls and container shops and what have you on a temporary basis, which will enable the locals to come and go. But I think the medium-term thing will be for us to have a look at the planning and give you options to say, well, we need to, if we're going to reactivate things like laneways and things like that, then we need to make a few tweaks. And I'm not talking Gold Coast tweaks. I'm just talking about enabling more floor space to go on what's existing there. We've got a lot of empty land in the middle of Byron Bay. Yeah,
it's surprising that, isn't it? When people have a walk around with fresh eyes, you do get to see all the actual sort of vacant spaces or the hollow spaces. It's interesting you talk about, trying to increase opportunities for people to live within Byron. I actually did many years ago live down in Bay Lane, down the end that is now, it's been knocked down. It was a little apartment building. It's now got a couple of restaurants there sort of across the laneway from the backpackers, so at the end, the opposite end of the beach hotel. And it was amazing living that close to town because you literally just walk out of your door and you hardly use your car, really.
Correct.
And around the world, I've lived in Washington, D.C., going right, where I opened my door and I was on the main street. It's not for everybody, but it's great to allow at least the possibility for those who want to live amongst it, to be able to do so. You're right. It means your cars use far less. and arguably you're more often interacting with those streets, perhaps making them safer, making them more engaging. When there's a resident population there, it lives and breathes sort of 24 hours as opposed to just when the shops are open and closed.
Yeah, look, Byron's known for its diversity, and over the last few years, that diversity is changing, and it's been dominated by tourism, which is important. But if we can do something to bring the housing diversity and that diversity back through some tweaks, then I think that will go some long way to helping alleviate some of the issues that we're seeing in Byron. But keeping what's there at the moment, that culture that it's there at the moment, and I think it's achievable.
Look, absolutely, and it's been a great journey so far with McGregor Coxall. Your organisation's willingness to listen and engage with the community, and as you've been at pains to suggest today, it's about not reinventing the wheel, but just tweaking it and making sure that it's working in the way that locals wish to. We want to have a town that we're proud of, and we also want to have a town that we think reflects who we are. And this process gives us this great opportunity. Thanks very much, Tim. No doubt you'll be up again soon enough when the next stage of this process unfurls. We are getting very close to a draft master plan that will be shared with the community, and anyone can then submit some responses and re-engage. It's really exciting times.
Thank you, Simon. Been fun.
No worries. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.